Welcome back, guys, to the TheSpurgeonPiper. This is Wilson with you. So a bit of a different video for this week. This is going to be the last recording in this office that I'm currently in. This location was just simply a rental house that we were going to be in for nearly a year as we moved here to Wichita Falls for our church plant, and me overseeing it as the current main elder or pastor. But we just bought a new home, and finally we're getting back out into the country. We're getting out back on land, and that has been a plan, a desire for over 6 years now. And I have pipes to clean, so I figured I'd give you a background on that. Background in farming, which is where my desires and roots begin, and why we long to get back to somewhat of a situation like that I grew up in. And so as I do that, I'm going to clean some pipes that need to be cleaned, and so it's a bit of a show and tell, if you will. So just real quick, setup. I carry around my cleaning supplies in a rag that I bundle up and keep in a drawer. Nothing fancy whatsoever. I have some Everclear in this alcohol container. I have some no-ox stem oil when I use for especially vulcanite stems. And then I have some hand-applied polish for my pipes I typically put on every time. If you want like a really deep and more focused look at my pipe cleaning regimen, I would check out a video on that. I might get it mixed up while I'm talking to you, so just keep that in mind. So, grew up on a farm. I would have been and I was for a while, a fourth generation farmer, conventional row crop farming, small town Texas and South Texas. And we did mostly cotton, peanuts, things like that. Occasionally we did try other things. Sesame seed. We did watermelon back in the day, but that was before the immigration laws changed, and that became more of a hassle to do. And so we stopped that when I was probably 10 or 12. It slowly dwindled away. So mostly peanuts was our main crop. I grew up on a farm, and most of the time while I was alive, at one point it was my grandfather and my dad and my uncle overseeing it, and then it was my dad and my uncle, brothers, overseeing it. And I grew up knowing I would not get into farming. I didn't want to get into farming. I didn't want to be in the heat, right? I didn't want to do the work. I didn't work nearly as much as my dad and my uncle did growing up. Lord knows that. But I told myself even the work I did do, I did not want to get back into it. And by the way, a lot of people get into farming nowadays, and they have this picturesque, rose-colored glasses of what farm life can be, which is glorious and wonderful at times. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's a lot of work, and it's a hard life. And I think most who get into it don't realize that. So anyhow, after graduating high school, getting up to college, I meet my wife, still with the mindset, I'm never going back to farming. And after some time, I was in the oil field for some time after college. Went back in a bit, but even before that, to help on the farm. My dad had cancer at the moment, and I went back, and I was in the midst of not knowing what to do in my life. So I went to farming for a while, and then I went into the oil field for a number of years, working in the oil field. And again, I was surprised to find myself getting back into somewhat of a hard, blue-collared work, working with my hands out in the heat. I did a bit of office work in the oil field, but it was a mix of both. But I started to advance, and my priorities got off track. I had a growing desire for farming yet again, for that lifestyle, for simplicity. I wanted it for my family. I already had a child at that time. My youngest son and my second oldest son would come along the way not long afterwards. So that desire began to come back, and I also wanted to lead my family as the spiritual leader, which I wasn't doing. I was not leading my family unto the Lord as I'm called to do. So long story short, the the Eagle Ford shale boom in South Texas, which was shooting off in the late aughts and early 20 teens, it started to collapse. And right when I had this desire to get into farming again, I was the first one to let go of the company I was part of. And so providentially, it worked out. They should have let go of me, and it worked out that I was let go. So I went back into farming. My dad had passed already. I went and work back on the family farm, and had great joy of it. Did the conventional row crops as usual, but during this time, and even back when I was in the oil field, I had a desire to go another direction, and that's more of, I would say, I don't know who is watching their familiarity with farming terminology, but I wanted to get more into regenerative agriculture, a mix of permaculture, silvopasture, and work more with livestock and integrate them into the landscape where both the land and livestock are well taken care of. I had a lot of research into that. I went into conferences and farming workshops across the country for this. And so I started in the beginning with meat birds, chickens. I started raising them in a backyard. So I would have a small chicken tractor, this portable, a portable chicken pen where there's no ground. So they would just keep moving, but they would always have new ground. I'd move them every day, every other day, depending on what the quality of the grass, right? And I would have in this portable pen chicken tractor, I would have maybe 20 of them or so. I think I started off my first batch 20, maybe it was 40. And I processed them, had them processed. We had them butchered and cleaned up. And I kept them, most of them for my family, so we ate them, and then gave some to family, friends, neighbors, things like that, people of the church. So that continued on, and I got into it. I had more interest involved from others. I really enjoyed it, and slowly it grew and grew and grew. I moved from the backyard onto the family land and started having larger chicken tractors, bigger and more of them, not just one, but multiple. And I started selling to more people around me, learning more of the trade. It got to the point where I went off on my own. We bought some smaller acreage. When I say smaller acreage, I'm talking about 27 to 30 acres. Compared to 700 or so my family owned, or it was 500, I should say. We leased extra from others. And so my family moved on the farm. Wonderful time in that regard. The venture grew as well. So during all this time, as I'm getting more into this farming venture, I had plans to add in silvopasture, meaning or tree crops along the way in the pasture. I had plans to add in other livestock as well, pigs, turkey, and for the size of the land, not as much, but possibly even cattle, or at least sheep, things like that. That was a plan. I was looking long term. But during all this time, I was growing into service of the church, the home church that I was part of originally and came back to. That's where my family was, in this small town, and the pastor wonderfully guided me, and I had a desire to serve all the more and study more of theology and doctrine, and serve in the church in any way I can. I had no intentions of teaching, certainly no intentions of preaching. I dreaded the idea of teaching, speaking in public. Even in college, when I had a communications class, my voice quivered. It almost sounded like I was about to cry. I was so awkward. Anyhow, during that time, I started to grow more spiritually in the faith, intellectually, and in my faith group. My pastor saw that, and he kind of guided me in teaching a Sunday school class, and things grew. I'm kind of spanning some years here to shorten everything. So that's happening along the way as this is occurring, and I'm getting more involved and reading more of great treatises in theology from throughout history, just soaking things up myself. Again, no intentions of going anywhere with that other than just personal benefit. So I get to the point with my chicken venture, and I'm doing farmers markets at this point, and I'm selling to co-op, which sells to a variety of people, and I'm selling to five-star restaurants. I get to the point where I am raising up 500 meat birds a month. All right, so they have a span of, say, let's just say 2 months. I would have 500 in a brooder, raising them for baby chicks, 500 out on pasture. And so they would go through this cycle, and I would move them around throughout our land under this huge portable building, like a carport that was on wheels, and I would scoot it around our building. I had livestock guardian dogs protecting the chickens. I had electric portable net wire that was protecting them as well. And so all of this was going on. My farming venture was improving. I was having more time with my family, though my wife was working more than we liked. And in that way, things were difficult. My wife was a speech pathologist. I think some of y'all know that from a conversation we had before. So this is all going on, and I'm starting to speak at conferences myself. Spoke at one in Indiana. I was on podcasts being interviewed. I got to feed one of the highlights of my time. I was able to feed my own chicken to Joel Salatin, if any of you are familiar with him, at Polyface Farms. It was a great opportunity. Got to meet some wonderful people. Everywhere from Wisconsin to California, I would visit and learn more of this system of agriculture that I still have a passion for. And all of that, I had a love for farming. I thought I wouldn't, as I said earlier, growing up, but it never went. It certainly never went away, and it grew as I got to be an adult. I love the lifestyle for my kids. It's what how I wanted to raise them. The ethics, the hard work, the values that are ingrained in that line of life is what I wanted my children to have. And so all this is going on, and then Hurricane Harvey comes into play in 2018, 2019, 2018. My memory can be a little fuzzy. And when Hurricane Harvey hit, our location in Texas didn't directly get hit by Hurricane Harvey, but most of my business was on the coast of Texas. And when Hurricane Harvey hit, it wiped out essentially my business. So 70 to 80% of my sales were coming from this, the coastal Bend area of Texas, and I lost all of that. And during this time, fast forwarding, I was already serving as like a youth pastor, associate pastor of a church nearby. I was sent out from my home church, started going to taking some seminary classes. And that was one of the hardest times of my life. I remember being out at night. I knew it was going to be one of my last batches of chickens. I didn't have many to sell. Or customers. And I just remember collapsing to the ground and weeping over that incident. And it actually aligned with the loss of one of it was our first daughter. My wife had a late term loss, a stillborn, and so these things collided. And it was around this time I was already accepting and having a better grounded understanding of the sovereignty of God, and even in the midst of loss. But it was a trying time for my wife. And one of the Psalms of Scripture that we hung on to, that I hung on to, was Psalm 73. Psalm 73, and I believe it starts in verse 25. The psalmist is questioning God, how can you be good when you allow these things to occur? And then he looks out onto the evil of the world, and he says the evil, they prosper, materially. They fatten themselves. They have these things. And then he says, but then I go into your sanctuary, and then I remember their end. And then he ends with comfort and the knowledge of God and who he is, his character. And he says, whom have I in heaven but you? And on earth I have nothing beside you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but you are the strength of my heart, my portion forever. And it was when in the midst of trial that God could appear such glorious, because He's good beyond all things. And maybe you're listening, you think, well, just losing a little farming venture is not a big deal. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not, is it? I mean, compared to other things that go on in life. But when you add the things together, as a big time of transition, it hit us hard. So anyway, it was around that time that I actually had an opportunity to go full-time into ministry, and that was where I formerly pastored. So we left farming altogether. We sold the place, and we drove away. My children, my two boys, who we only had at the time, we didn't have my two other children, were, even at that age, they were longing to go back to the farm. They were upset. I was upset. This was a dream. This was what we wanted. And so we drove away, traveling on the other side of Texas almost, to answer the call of ministry, and which I wholeheartedly have been grateful for. I couldn't imagine not doing what I do now. But this whole time, I've had a desire, a hunger to get back into, even if it's not farming for a living necessarily, which it's not, getting back into providing in a way for my family in that regard. All right, teaching them for the love of the soil, for the love of animals, and care for them. So we go to Dawson, Texas, and we're living in town. It's in a parsonage, meaning it's a house owned by the church, and it's fine, and we did well. But all that time, I was longing. All right, the whole time I was just waiting. I didn't know when it would occur. I wanted to be patient. We wanted to be patient. My wife had the desire to, and we wanted to be faithful where we were. All right. The Lord has given us much, and we were blessed, and He's good Himself, outside of all material blessings. And so we wanted to be faithful where we were. So fast forward even farther than that, and we come to Wichita Falls for this church plant, Covenant Baptist Church of Wichita Falls, which is a Second London Baptist confessing church, or Reformed Baptist church. And we're in this lease house, and again, yet waiting. And then finally, despite not having a whole lot of finances to use, we start looking for homes. There's not much available. Not much, let me rephrase that. There's not much on land available, but we finally found a home. The home needs work, but it came with a small amount of acreage, what we could afford, and we were excited. And so that's where we go from here. As I said, this would be the last video in this room, which I've been grateful for. It's a small study. You could probably tell in my videos. It's not a big room, but it's done the job. And so we have been grateful without even doing anything yet to the land. It needs a lot of work. We've been grateful to return. My kids are excited. I'm excited. And all that's going to be is everything from some gardening at the moment to raising some, even starting with chickens and egg layers and maybe even some meat birds. But more importantly than those, it's the value that my kids will understand. It's the skills that I grew up with that many won't grow up with. And that has been the ultimate guide for getting back to such a location or such a living arrangement is, how will I be raising my children? There are more important things than raising children on land. I want to raise children up to love the Lord and go the way as they should, to look beyond simply having a good career and a good job. Those things will fade. Those things offer no long-lasting hope. They have no long-lasting value or joy. We were not made for those things. I want them to feel what Augustine of Hippo in the 4th century said: our hearts are restless until we find rest in you. And ultimately, that's what I want to teach my children, to find rest in Christ. But along with that, I wanted them to have the skills that their forefathers had, that were in my family. And so we get back to that. And so going forward, I look forward to showing you guys my new office or study that I'll be working out of. It needs some work. It needs some renovation. I'm not a big renovation guy, I got to tell you, but it needs to be done, and I'm looking forward to getting it done. But it took a long time of waiting and patience, and patience is difficult. Patience is difficult. I remember I was teaching in the book of James at my former church, and I was preaching through it, and a congregant tells me, "You really hit on patience a lot. Why are you hitting on patience so much? Why does James hit on patience so much?" And I told him, because you stink at it. And I stink at it. I think most of us do. We are not, especially in our day and age, we are people who move quickly or want quickly. We live in a place of consumerism. We want fast food and fast internet, and we want immediate results. We have social media that we quickly look through and slide through because we're not satisfied. And so patience is one of the great virtues that we need to learn to exercise and grow. So with that, again, this will be the last time in this office. Look forward to what's to come, and for bringing forth you guys more content and material. But that's all I have today, guys. I'm sure I messed up on cleaning these pipes. I didn't go through it the proper way because when I'm talking, I'm not thinking about it. But hopefully you get an idea of what I usually do. Well, that's all I have this week, guys. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're blessed, and we'll talk to you very soon.